Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Everything appears to be sinking. Stacey Herbert, talk to me.
It's more like listing to the side, everything is. Well, Max, I have this great headline here. South African police rescue Asian pair kidnapped in 419 scam. After hundreds and hundreds of billions of emails sent by Nigerian scamsters, somebody apparently answered one of them. A South Korean man received an email promising him tens of millions of dollars in a lottery scheme, and he traveled to South Africa when he fell for it. Of course, the scamsters then promptly kidnapped him and his daughter and held them for ransom. Now, the offer turned out to be a so-called 419 scam on an epic scale, the article says. The term 419 scam is used to describe a confidence trick, and it refers to Section 419 of the Nigerian Criminal Code for obtaining property through fraud.
Wow, so all that spam finally paid off. Only 5 trillion spams later. That's fantastic. They're really pioneering, the Nigerians, on the whole fraud basis. You know, all these banks on Wall Street have gone to school on this, of course, and they're building their models around the Nigerian fraud. So this is really the trendsetter around the globe.
But it's a theme that we've been focusing on over the last few years of Keiser Report, however, Max. Here's these guys, these Nigerian guys, there were like 4 or 5 of them, hard working. They had to send out 5 trillion emails to get this one guy to come down there. They're entrepreneurs. Wall Street does this over and over again, and who rescues us? Nobody. There is one potential rescuer here. Oakeshott tackles Goldman Sachs. So Liberal Democrat peer Lord Oakeshott, in an interview on Sky News, said it's been known for some time that Goldman helped Greece rig the figures to get into the euro and not meet all the tests they should have done. That's something that Lord MacDonald and I will be taking up further in the Lords.
You know, this brings up something. First of all, we've been talking about this for years now, that Goldman cooked Greece's books as part of the fraudulent euro scheme going back to 2000. But, you know, when I read the Sunday Times this past weekend, Rupert Murdoch's rag, they were covering this story, and they said 2 things. Number one, well, technically it's not illegal. But then later on in the story, they said, of course, Goldman Sachs did rig the markets, which of course is illegal. So here you have the problem on the mainstream media front. They've been told to lead the article by saying technically it's not legal, and then later on in the article, they have a crisis of conscience and they say, well, yes, they are rigging the markets, Goldman Sachs. They are committing financial fraud. But for propaganda purposes, they fail to put that in the lead. So let's correct that error right now. Goldman Sachs committed fraud as it relates to Greece's inclusion in the euro by rigging markets.
Exactly. They've defrauded not only the taxpayers, but bondholders and investors around the world who invested in this stuff based on Goldman Sachs' lie, of which only they knew, and the insiders in the Greek government who also were able to make huge profits on betting against their own debt.
Absolutely. This came out as well. Insiders were buying and selling those credit default swaps, booking huge gains based on this fraud perpetrated by Goldman Sachs. Now, suddenly, 10 years later, they're saying, oh, well, the whole Greek unraveling, the whole ratings downgrade unraveling, well, it has its genesis in that basic fraud. You know, I'm surprised Goldman Sachs doesn't try to buy these Nigerian email scamsters and incorporate them down there at 85 Broad Street or wherever one of their offices are on Wall Street, because they could be doing great business for them.
Yeah, but the important thing here, Max, is that we laugh at these South Koreans who answered this email, and it took 5 trillion emails to finally get somebody to believe in the scam. People are still buying to this day various scams sold to them by Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, and it should be just as ridiculous that people even believe the credit derivative fraud scams, the 419 scams of credit derivatives that people believe.
Yeah, well, Goldman Sachs traders are on the phone cold calling pension funds and grandmas and orphans, trying to push junk into these accounts. It's the old Wall Street fast calls, fast talking Wall Street junk sellers, and Goldman Sachs is just the same as anybody else. They've got a boiler room. Goldman Sachs is a boiler room. They sell a lot of really horrible junk into people's accounts, and they suffer horribly. At least the Sunday Times did mention that people are suffering pain and misery as a result of it. So it goes beyond just stealing money, Goldman Sachs. I mean, they're actually causing physical pain and in some cases death.
You know that this Greek credit and debt crisis has trumped all other news, even the downgrade of various European nations. Everybody's most concerned about Greece, and you know the creditors are now in Greece trying to renegotiate this deal. Greece's debt talks with creditors stall amid coupon dispute. So that was last week when the creditors had walked away from the talks after failing to agree with the Greek government about how much money investors will lose by swapping their bonds, increasing the risk of the euro area's first sovereign default. So apparently it's the hedge funds in particular who want to make as much profit as possible, and the only way, therefore, they're demanding 100% repayment on these bonds or an outright default. They don't want a voluntary arrangement because they want to be paid off on their credit default swaps.
Well, people should understand that leading up to the crisis was the result of financial masochism. These are financial firms like Goldman Sachs masochistically destroying countries like Greece and Ireland, Portugal, and others. Now that we've had the result of the crisis and they're trying to eke out austerity measures, this is sadism. So sadomasochism, economics, is the preferred model of the Wall Street bankers. And one only assumes that Lloyd Blankfein puts on, one of those red ball around the neck with in the mouth.
The GIMP?
The GIMP. Goldman Sachs is Tim Geithner's GIMP. So whenever Tim Geithner needs to push some more really bad sovereign debt, he says, call out the GIMP. And out of the floor comes Lloyd Blankfein with one of those S&M contraptions on and a leather, latex stretch suit. And then some good old boys, some rednecks, have their way with him with shotguns. I wish we had that on video.
Well, about these failed talks between the Greek government and the creditors, here's what Carl Denninger wrote. Greece, the fuse is in the box. The Greeks have figured out that when you owe someone money and borrowed it unsecured, as is always true for sovereigns, you have the trump hand. So Greece is finally recognizing that they owe billions and billions of dollars, and they're the ones that have the negotiating power in this situation. Why are they sitting at a table with these guys who are demanding 100% repayment? They should just walk away and say, I'll give you 2 cents on the dollar for even suggesting that.
Absolutely. I mean, again, this article in the Times was very revealing because it talked about how Goldman Sachs was losing money hand over fist after the 9/11 attacks because volume had dried up. And it was some trader in Europe who came up, she found the loophole that allowed for Goldman to sell Greek fraudulent paper without getting quote unquote caught. And this has set the stage for this massive journey into a fraudulent black hole. Now Greece is waking up to the fact that, wait a minute, you're the ones who stand to lose. Even if we default on all of our bonds, 2 or 3 years later, we can sell new bonds. Look at Iceland. Iceland was able to sell new bonds 2 or 3 years after they defaulted. Look at Argentina. They sold new bonds after they defaulted. The idea that you won't be able to sell bonds after you default is bogus. That's an idea sold to you by the same people who put you into this untenable position. I only wish Ireland would figure this out. Ireland still believes that they have to kowtow to the terrorists, the financial terrorists that are holding them hostage. That's not true.
At the top of the show, we talked about this 419 scam on an epic scale. Then Carl Denninger basically suggests that's what these no default risk of sovereign bonds is as well. Because he says they're right, the Greeks, to walk away, incidentally. The utter and complete fraud in our banking structures that allow institutions to hold these sorts of debts as quote-unquote risk-free, requiring no reserves and no capital behind them, is an outrage. It is systemic and intentional fraud perpetrated upon the world for the sole benefit of making possible national overspending with impunity, destroying any sort of market discipline aimed at budgetary deficits.
Right, and to add to the psychosis, the rating agencies. Remember, last year they were saying countries like Greece and Ireland, they need to impose austerity measures in order to maintain their terrible rating. It'll be downgraded. Now, after these rating agencies have downgraded all these European countries, they're saying the reason is because of the austerity measures and the inability for these countries to pay their debt due to the austerity measures. It's complete psychosis. Remember, 2 or 3 years ago, they gave collateralized debt obligations that were 99% worthless junk and 1% AAA paper, overall AAA rating. It's reverse drug dealing. Imagine a cocaine dealer who's selling you drugs. He will take some cocaine and mix it in with baby laxative and sell it to you like it's all cocaine. The rating agencies, S&P, Moody's, and Fitch, they do the reverse. They take essentially junk paper and they cut it with just a little bit of AAA paper. That's the baby laxative, the AAA paper, and they call the whole thing AAA. So it's reverse drug dealing by rating agencies as it pertains to sovereign debt. And unfortunately, everyone's been on this worthless stuff, and as a result, they're addicted to it, and they all need to be put in rehab.
Well, of course, this fraud that these are risk-free is what happened with MF Global, and that's why that whole scam fell apart and why the investors were looted and their funds stolen, because, you know, one of the guys, a former governor, former Goldman Sachs dude, John Corzine, thought that all these European peripheral debts would be bailed out at 100 cents on the dollar, because this is the way things operate in this scam.
Quick little aside here. You mentioned John Corzine. That money still hasn't been recovered. It's known now that Jamie Dimon stole from his own customers. He hasn't been facing any questions by Congress or any authority or any police or anything like this. So it's outright confiscation of wealth. Hello, confiscation of the Weimar Republic. That led to slippery slope down to imprisonment. And the new laws in the U.S., of course, support that, the NDAA, etc.
Yeah, but that's what a 419 scam is confiscation of property through fraud and deception, and that's what John Corzine operated. And you mentioned austerity, Max, and here's a headline that just shows you the mentality of these likes of these banksters and the oligarchs running our world. Downing Street rejects Diamond Jubilee royal yacht idea. So Education Secretary Michael Gove had proposed taxpayers fund a gift likely to cost at least £60 million to mark momentous occasion of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. He said, in spite and perhaps because of the austere times, the celebration should go beyond those of previous jubilees and mark the greater achievement and the diamond anniversary represents. Now, Downing Street has rejected this royal yacht, but it just shows you the mentality that they think austerity, there's never enough austerity for the peasants. But if the peasants must suffer, then we lords, we feel so bad that you must make us feel better and buy us yachts, because it will make you feel better. The trickle-down joy to you peasants will be so grand.
How about a royal enema to help flush out the Queen? Stacey Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Don't go away, much more coming your way, so stay right there. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to New York and speak with Warren Pollock, a semi-retired Wall Street executive who now blogs and vlogs at wepollock.com. Warren, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Hi, Max.
All right, Warren, we've gone over the details of the MF Global crime scene a few times here on the Keiser Report. Tell us what you think is the bigger story of MF Global.
Right now, we're watching law being changed to selective interest, the interests of J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and the banking cartel. And what they're trying to do right now is set themselves up for a bank holiday. And what they're saying is that their speculation will always be subsidized by customer funds. And when you look at the amount of speculation which is in place, it's trillions of dollars versus real assets, which are only perhaps 1/100th of that amount. So when losses are sustained, which they will be through this financial crisis in Europe and in the US, the only source of savings that can be tapped is in fact customer funds. So we're watching J.P. Morgan in bankruptcy court trying to claw back customer funds and trying to change fact so that it can have priority over funds which were supposed to be segregated in the first place. And they're building a model for a global bank holiday in which we will see savings just basically raped from every person that has money in the system in a supposedly safe place, including pensions, bank accounts, brokerage accounts. And that's the process which is underway. It's the setting of precedent to steal people's money.
Now, Warren Pollack, you say that we're watching laws being changed for selective interests on Wall Street, but that's not new. That's been the story for 30 years, going all